Okay, well then let us get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those of you I don't know or don't know me, my name is Monica Buda. I'm the Vice President of Development here at the Cathedral. I've been in this amazing community for 10 months since last October, and I've completely enjoyed each minute of it. And I will tell you that one of the highlights of being in this gracious cathedral is getting to know Kent and his music team and the absolute beauty that they bring to everything they touch. And so we are especially thrilled to share a couple of minutes with you today at lunchtime and sort of lift the veil of what is all that hard work and all that thought that goes into creating the beautiful music that we get to enjoy every year. So everybody knows Kent, I know that, but I'm just going to crow about him for a moment. He is the director of music here at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, and that's choral and symphonic music, and he is an organ virtuoso as well. So he is the complete package for us. He has been called one of America's leading choral conductors and one of the brightest stars in choral music in New York's choral music scene. And that was a quote by the New York Times. He is also the director, and in addition to working with us, he's also the director of the Oratorio Society and Musica Sacra, two other prestigious choral endeavors in New York. And Kent, I think if I am right about this, you will be working at Lincoln Center. You have something coming up at Lincoln Center in October?
I'm the organist of the New York Philharmonic, and so we're opening the new hall with Respighi Pines of Rome. So that's really an exciting thing.
That's exciting.
Soon. It's not we don't have a pipe organ in the new hall. We did our best to try that, but the space was whittled out. You know, the architects needed this for air conditioning ductwork and this for wiring, and after a while, so we have what is a really very fine digital instrument, and we'll be doing the tonal finishing for that. So yeah, I'm going to be living down there a little bit in the next 3 weeks.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And we also have Bryan Zaros with us today, and Bryan is our associate music director and choir master. So he works with the choristers music group, the children from the school who sing as a choir together, and oversees the cathedral's choral program as well. And Bryan, would you like to say a few more words about any other endeavors you're part of outside of the cathedral?
Oh yes, certainly. Well, now I'm in my 7th year at the cathedral, and it's been a lot of fun, a lot of great
it's been
moments.
amazing, very amazing.
And even in the past 2-3 years during pandemic, we've had a really rich experience here at the cathedral. We didn't stop. In fact, we grew. We grew a lot ensemble wise and such. So we are emerging in this moment in a period of strength, and really looking forward to what the future will hold.
Well, and I want to say Bryan has just been named actually music director of the Central City Chorus, which is a long established, wonderful New York chorus, and you're also director of the Pro Art Chorus in Choral in New Jersey. And Bryan, you know, he certainly supervises the choristers, but he's an equal conductor with the cathedral choir. He leads the cathedral chorale with Dan Ficcari. It's amazing to be able to have the kind of depth that we have here with Bryan's expertise and his talent.
Well, thank you. We are so glad to have two superstars with us today. So wonderful. Now, I think we were going to kick it off with just sort of allowing people to maybe answer a question you have, Ken.
Oh, well, yes. So that question, you know, we just love to hear before we dive in, what do you folks think is involved in programming? If you were to pick one thing and say, well, it must be, what would it be? Bob and Pat.
Yeah, just shout it out.
Go ahead, Diane. Lee.
I guess it's the music you have to worry about first. What are you going to choose?
Good.
I would think comprehensiveness.
Can you say a little more about that?
Well, in terms of the range of traditions that are available to us and how they mesh.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's not Vivaldi all the time. It's It's a more textured range of things.
My fellow music
how about-
director,
How
Steve.
about the audience you're trying to reach? Do you want to anticipate
right.
who it is you want to appeal to?
Yes.
The liturgical context.
That's
When
right.
I think of the importance of the cathedral, I think of what is it that makes it different from every other place in the city. And I think that that's an important factor because there's lots, I'm a native New Yorker, cradle Episcopalian, there's a lot to do in New York. And I also tend to be a person that pushes the envelope and asks, you know, why should I do what I do with the person that I'm doing it with? I mean, if that makes any sense. So one of the things that has always attracted me to the music program is the diversity. I don't think of any other place to go to on New Year's Eve because I think the concert is very important. I go to a lot of other places for good music. And so to me, it's the cathedral's need to never forget that it is a house of prayer for all people.
Wow.
And so therefore, I think that sometimes we stray, but I also think that it's one of the things that when we do it well. So that's kind of like where I'm coming from.
Well,
Thank you.
these are fantastic. And I think we can dive in perhaps, Monica.
Yeah, that's what I say. I think that really set the stage well. So I think we're going to frame, if you don't mind, Kent and Bryan, I'd like to frame sort of my question to you that will, I think, hope set the stage for what you will share with us is sort of imparting your wisdom to us. If there were three things, first talking about the season on an artistic level, and then on a logistical level, what are your three main artistic considerations in planning the GMGS season? And what are your three primary considerations for the logistics of planning the season? To you.
Well, we've already hit the nail on the head. One of the things that I've always been most interested in is how can we in a series embrace the widest possible spectrum of music. And in this day, that means more than ever, you know, what does this mean for the diversity of the composers that we have, and the diversity of, hopefully, of the audience that we can appeal to. So the diversity is the artistic consideration. Another artistic consideration, Bryan, you just interrupt me, but another artistic consideration that we hit the nail on the head with is the space. And how can we use this extraordinary space, and what does this extraordinary space call us to do artistically? Because of its beauty, but also the visual beauty, the architectural beauty, of course, and the acoustics, and what works and what doesn't work, and how do we find, you know, the best element there. And then, of course, what would you say the third thing artistically would be, Bryan?
Well, I mean, I would say that when we're pushing a season, there's a little bit of looking backwards, but as well as looking forwards. And that's somewhat been part of the headstone of what the cathedral is all about since, you know, the very beginning, been kind of being on the avant-garde of things. And so seeing how, you know, the artistic world is a living art form, and there's so much happening even now. And yes, we honor the greats of previous generations and years, but there is so much creativity happening now. So I think part of it, I mean, we're talking about diversity of first period, but I think also giving an opportunity for the art to continue and chart a future is probably an important part.
That's right. That's right. The old and the new, the much longed for and the unexpected.
I love that you shared that. Would it be possible, and I hate to put you on the spot, but would it be possible to give a specific example of how you intentionally selected the pieces that will go into this season to sort of look at the history and sort of those good, you know, what everybody wants to hear every year, and something new that you're pulling in?
You know, I would love to go there. Let me answer all of the three logistical elements too.
Absolutely.
So the three logistical would be, of course, resources in terms of support and funding so that we can determine the musical resources, meaning personnel and amount of possible rehearsal, resources in terms of the availability of the space, and
Staff, the personnel.
yeah, it's just staff and personnel. So, and resources in terms of the actual the music. And then, with that, Monica, I wonder if we could look at first the brochure. Folks, this is the brochure coming out shortly. There's just like one more edit. So you are the first to see this year's season. And let me kind of explain, and then we're going to zero right in and go to your point, Monica. So we always have a welcome, and we decided this year that our very joyous down on your left photo, it's with Greg Pernhagen. That seems to be Tritle, and I see Bryan Zaros. And anyway, that rather than a stayed posed concert photo, we would just say, hey, come back. We're moving past this exodus that we've been on. Then you'll see we have the choral concert series. And each of these is actually quite diverse in its own way. And we have this is a Musica Sacra concert on October 25th. Musica Sacra does 2 concerts here, and because they do that, we're able to then have a 4-concert choral concert series. That doesn't mean the holiday concerts, and so that's what you see there. We may come back to that, and then over on the right you see the holiday concerts, and there's a Christmas, and then there's New Year's Eve. And so I would love to zero in on New Year's Eve. Monica, could you screen share the New Year's Eve working document that I have? And this goes to the point of a number of these queries here.
So let's see if I can find, I think this is it. That's it, right?
Yes, I don't think there's anything illegal on here, folks. So New Year's Eve is the rabbit we pull out of a hat. When we first took over New Year's Eve, because it was subcontracted prior to my being here, when we first took over, we were able to do whatever could be done with one single chorus and orchestra rehearsal, 1 3-hour rehearsal the day of, period. Now that precludes doing something like Beethoven 9. You just can't do that on one rehearsal. We've now expanded to where we have actually a separate choral rehearsal. And then we have the combined rehearsal, and then we have the concert. And still, by standards, that's very little for what we're doing, but the pulling the rabbit out of the hat. Here we go. Let me explain whoops, I just did something funny. There we go. So I always love to open with something. Well, let me just say, when I had attended at other times, the concert opened with a lot of very ponderous discussion, and eventually got to the music. And what I think is very important is that we have, hey, it is New Year's Eve. We want to rejoice. We also want to reflect. And so in this case, Gustav Holst's St. Paul's Suite is a suite for the strings, and it's just a lovely orchestra piece that I think will really warm hearts and raise spirits. David Lang, Pulitzer Prize winning composer, wrote a stunning ethereal choral work called Make Peace. So here you have a living American composer who is in the piece, and you see that we put in the timings here when we're thinking about this. I would love to show you my, it's over here. I have contact with very, very many composers, and well, maybe I've placed, oh, here, sure. I have lots of these things. This is New Year's Eve. Let me see if I can do this. This is music that I'm holding on to for New Year's Eve. I have, if I were able to screen share, I'd show you my inbox. I have a composer inbox. I hear from about 50, 60 composers a year who are sending material here. Would you consider this? Would you consider this? Would you consider this? And then I have a soloist file as well. But back to this, Joseph Turin, who has written for us actually before, was moved by the Ukrainian conflict to take a poem, or a narration. It's a story from Leningrad during the siege of World War II. So this is a fable, or it may be true. We do not know. But the story is told by the girl who survives and about her family, her grandmother, her mother, being where they were, being malnourished and having a cat. And the cat's name is Vaska. And Vaska went out, verklempt bringing this up, Vaska went out and brought in food. So imagine that he's written this for narrator strings. It's a very touching, touching story set to music. This will be the world premiere of this piece, this lullaby for Vaska. And you don't look at the narrator portion. We haven't worked that out yet. We're going to follow that. So this is our moment to reflect on David Lang. We need to make peace. Let's reflect on what is dedicated to the people in Ukraine, but calls back another terrible, terrible time in our history. And then we sang the prayer for Ukraine, which was done on Saturday Night Live. You may or may not recall that way back, but we will sing that. That is this beautiful piece that is of the 19th century and has been associated with Ukraine's longing for independence since the late 19th century. Then we go to a look at what with our pandemic, what with our monkeypox, with everything. We're actually going to take a step back and also acknowledge what was the AIDS crisis, but that resonates with our own experiences, I think, in these recent years. And so we have two songs for piano and vocalist. Now, Dan Ficcari is, as you see, he's born in 1996. Dan is our associate music director organist. And so he wrote this beautiful, beautiful piece for piano and soloist for an LGBTQ event that took place down St. Paul the Apostle. And Walt Whitman in 1989 is one of my favorites. Jamette and Greg will be singing. Dan may be reorchestrating some of these things. And we're following that with, whereas last year we did the 7 last words of the unarmed.
Yeah.
Right?
That was so
acknowledged,
Joel Thompson.
Joel Thompson, the incredible, and Brian conducted, it was extraordinary. This year, Philip Herbert is a Black English composer who wrote a piece upon police on Black violence about 20 years ago. But it's a beautiful piece. And so we've rented that, and that will be another orchestra moment. Amy Summers, again, is another living composer, American. You notice so far, these are all males, right? So I am thrilled to say we've discovered a whole trove of music by female composers that's been incredibly curated. And so we're going to do we have the In Memoriam, and the Nunc Dimittis is Let Your Servant Depart in Peace, right? And so these things pair up, and there is a connection and emotional flow through the program from making peace to all of this. And then we have Wang Ji. Wang Ji is this extraordinary, she's from China. She lives in the neighborhood, and I commissioned this work with Musica Sacra for her to write for the Musica Sacra chorus. I want to do it again. I want more people to hear it. Be the Bread it's an ancient text that is of the from the Farsi tradition, and it is be the essence of life. Be what you can be, really, is where this goes. It's encouragement and enlivenment. It is exuberant. It is hard for the chorus, but really joyous. So that will bring us to a point of conclusion, and we'll sing This Little Light of Mine. So what we just talked about was the variety of composers, the variety of textures, meaning a cappella, vocalist piano, orchestra alone, all together. We finished with the traditional This Little Light of Mine. That's one glimpse into this. concert. Now, if we were able to have more rehearsal, oh, could we do the fourth movement of Beethoven 9? You bet. But that's kind of the world that we live in. I'm excited about this concert. What do you guys think? And feel free to unmute and chime in if you like. This is so Monica.
I think it's wonderful that you're starting the new year with so much new music, giving these young composers the opportunity to be heard. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Oh,
Wonderful.
thank you. Thank you.
Good work. Thank you.
Oh, good. We changed up a few elements, for this year. What we've done is put the resources into the string orchestra, and not have as many winds. Therefore, we're not doing the Bach Dona Nobis, but I also felt like we had done the Bach Dona Nobis. We will do it again. Why not do something really new and different with Wang Ji's piece this year? And I feel that our audience who come will be pleased with that. I hope so.
Will you have the organ back, and if not, when will you? Just to get to the side.
Oh yeah, and then there's the organ. So we are still with our digital instrument. The short answer is everything seems on track for us to have the great organ back on April 2nd, Palm Sunday. 4 years. 4 years to the date, to the liturgical date that it was actually pulled out of service.
Wow. So one of the things I really loved about drilling down into looking at just that one concert was, again, how you showed us the balance of, living composers, dead composers, American composer, that all tied into the theme and your thoughtfulness around the theme. Can you share a little bit about then how those sort of micro considerations create the selection for the whole season? Like, how do you create that balance on a larger scale? And if you want me to pull up the
brochure, I would love to do that. Yeah, no, dream come true. We live with these things, and then we hope that we hear, from our friends after they've experienced it within the windows.
Well, often it's the time of year that influences kind of the repertoire and such. So of course, the New Year's Eve concert features music that's, again, looking somewhat backwards, but looking forwards.
And looking at peace specifically.
And looking at themes that perhaps we have struggled with throughout this past year and that we're still trying to resolve. And of course, the joy of Christmas concerts really about celebrating that great season. And that features all of our liturgical ensembles, all the choirs, choristers, Choral, our cathedral choir, and our new ensemble called Schola Cantorum, which is an ensemble of youth from throughout the area. Up to this point in our history at the cathedral, you had to be a student at the cathedral school to sing at the cathedral. Right. And in the past few years, just before pandemic, we started something called the Schola Cantorum, which allows children who would like to sing from around the community to join us. And they have a weekly rehearsal. And we had that first rehearsal yesterday. That's led by our organ scholar, Sam Kufor.
Right down here, Sam.
Yeah,
down there. But yeah, to answer your question, a lot of the influences of the actual concerts are based on what's happening at that time. So if we look at our March concert, it's The Light of Paradise. And that concert happens, just a few weeks before Holy Week. So we have, of course, we're featuring the Stabat Mater of David Briggs, and we're bringing Morton Lordson's Lux Aeterna, and we're doing this, of course, with an idea of refocusing towards the heavenly as we approach Holy Week.
That's right. And if we look at the choral concert series, thank you, Brian, from the top down, you'll see how these are what we try to do is get very different kinds of programming. The music for a Gothic space, now there it is. We're talking about the architecture of the cathedral. And in doing that, this concert uses the form of the Mass, using late medieval settings of the Kyrie Gloria Sanctus Agnus of the Mass, interspersing that with the Gregorian chant Mass, which is for chant for martyrs, for pluribus martibus, but for martyrs, and then interposing in the places where we might have motets, choral works from this trove that we've discovered of female composers. So it's new music set within the context of old music so that we can hear everything really freshly. That's the music for Gothic space. So again, we've got new music, but we've really got Gothic music. We're saying we're in this glorious Gothic space. Then you do see the light of paradise. And that, one of the interesting things here, when it comes to programming, we love to do this concert on the Tuesday before Palm Sunday. However, we also really want our full choral program to participate, and it doesn't help do the Tuesday before Holy Week when the kids are off on winter break. So we've moved it earlier this year. It's about 4 weeks before Holy Week, but it's during Lent, and fantastic. David Briggs is our wonderful artist in residence, and he has written this Stabat Mater, which is for orchestra choir soloist. This will be the world premiere. There's a lot of enthusiasm. It will be performed in many locations in the US and in England after this. And there's even plans, Stephen Layton is planning to record it over in England at some point with the Trinity College, Trinity College, Cambridge. But we get to do the premiere. So now there you are with an orchestral, choral, oratorio, ethereal massed choir kind of a concert. The multitude of voices, again, this is a particular theme this year, really, is the multitude of voices and truly the gender mix. Here we have music from going back to the 17th century, from convents in Spain and Italy, right through more recent 19th century compositions. And then also Ronnie Arbo wrote Crossing the Bar, which Ronnie was a former chorister at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. And there's Melanie Moore. It's not Melanie Moore. Hello. There's a wonderful work by our composer. I'll have this in just a second. Arbo, there we are. Well, there's Undine Smithsmore's work, which we are doing. And this one is just, hang on. It's such a gorgeous piece. Oh yeah, Melanie Demore. That's why I looked at Moore. But D-E, capital M-O-R-E, she lives in the Bronx. She's a social activist and has written a piece that will be on this multitude of voices. So what we are doing here is we are also including the voice of J.S. Bach. So we'll have Jesu meine Freude, and then this wonderful compilation of new and old music, really celebrating a diversity of composers. And that's specifically what that is about. Now, completely contrasting from any of that is Venice, City of Light. We have a collaboration that we do with Rose of the Compass, and Rose of the Compass is a wonderful world music group comprised of recorder who also plays Shalamo, the if I may say, the Middle Eastern clarinet, and then some of the top players in the world for percussion, world music percussion, Glenn, and also Kanun, which is like a psaltery, almost like an auto harp, but played with the fingers and with finger picks, and oud, the Arabic lute, if you know. Each year we try to look at cross-cultural situations, and where would we have Arabic music, music from the Judaic tradition, the Christian tradition, the folk traditions, and how could this all be? And so we're looking at Venice as a crossroads this year, and then we'll celebrate, and we'll have pull together it's a really splendid concert. So that's this year's diversity within that realm.
No, that sounds exceptional. And your enthusiasm and love for this music is just, it is such a privilege to hear you talk about it, because I want to be right there with every one of those instruments. I think we all need a music lesson, actually. I think that's what we need, is a music lesson, so you can take us through all the instruments.
Oh, just bring yourselves in your ears, we'll do the rest.
So what you are able to do with a season is just tremendous and inspirational. And you mentioned some constraints, and I'm not sure that everybody on the call really understands what those are in terms of space, and sort of you referred to it with the, I think, the concert for peace. You said, if I had time to rehearse, you know, it's very complex. The cathedral environment is very complex, and so there are lots of things being scheduled, and so, you know, we have to sort of, it's lots of moving parts, you know, to figure out when the rehearsals can take place, how many days you have to rehearse, and I don't think everyone truly appreciates that. So I think that's an important thing for our good friends to understand about how you pull this off, is working within the time constraints that are available to you for rehearsal time and space. And obviously the number of people you can, the musicians, right, that you are able to hire or bring in, or, you know, different types of instrumentation that you can employ for any one of these pieces. So you work within this set of constraints. And I would ask you, before we open it up to questions from everyone else, if resources were not an issue, if funding was not an issue, if you just were given $1 million to say, what would your season look like? How would you go about putting it together? And what might that look like? Can you give us a taste of that?
Okay, well, the essential idea, and you just jump in, Brian, you know, but the essential idea of what we've described would be amplified. Number one, everything would be streamed. And it would be streamed, not ticketed. I mean, we would do, you know, people could come and be live, and which people will still do. And I've come to believe that streaming is not competitive with having a live audience. Streaming is about getting your message out to the world, you know, and sharing. And so number one, everything would be streamed. Number two, we could have more diversity in terms of doing, for example, let me say that except for the New Year's Eve concert and even the March 8th concert, the David Briggs piece, we have maybe 22, 24 professional singers. We would really wish to have 32 to 40 professional singers, or those other concerts, the Gothic Space, those concerts, those are concerts done with about 16 singers. And there are times it's great to work with a small group like that, but to have more singers employed would actually be a better match for the space that we're working to fill. And then the key element is more rehearsal. So I'm kind of famous for doing a lot of things on very little rehearsal because of, you know, circumstances. But for example, one of my colleagues downtown who has a wonderful series, Voices of Ascension, you know, they won't do a concert without at least 6 or 7 rehearsals. And we are lucky to have 4, which we do for these 4 2.5-hour rehearsals. Oh, if we had 5, you know, and then one of the things that you folks might be interested in, typically, for example, that talk about the Venice concert. Those rehearsals are probably going to happen in alternate spaces, and we'll get into the cathedral the Monday night before for a dress rehearsal in the space where we can try to fine tune it, and then have a concert on Tuesday. So that is a true constraint, but this having places to rehearse is not the problem. Having the ability to rehearse more or go more deeply into things is always the challenge.
I would say also it would be neat if there was an unlimited budget, would be to see what we could do in terms of kind of somewhat structural changes. The idea perhaps of focusing like a acoustical shell or something like that.
Oh, well, yes, then there are those.
As you,
I don't think I understood what you said.
Well, as you might know, that the space itself presents challenges in a sense that we have different sizes of different ensembles performing in the same, you know, Gothic expansive space. So it presents some challenges, and of course the rehearsal process, believe it or not, has a large element of sound balances and making sure things work. And believe it or not, 10 feet, you know, chairs 10 feet apart could have a totally different experience, good or or not as great.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be neat if we did have at some point some resources to perhaps develop a concert shell that, of course, didn't take away from the beautiful aesthetic of the building, but also enhance the audio. There could be some mileage there, perhaps.
Well, then I actually I had a conversation 8 years ago, and it was actually cool. I had people interested, and we were unable to move it forward, where I had an acoustician come in to say, okay, if we're doing a concert in the Crossing, what do we need to do to improve the experience for the audience? And the answer was construct out of a reflective canvas material a shell, literally a back wall that you could fly in and fly out. We would need to go up into the attic of the cathedral, install, a support beam, and then lower to the ceiling, through the ceiling, the cables. But if you had this, it would be at that time about $150,000 structure that would fold up eventually and go into storage. Then you could improve the projection forward of the sound for certain of these concerts. It's different if we take City of Venice, it's, for example, into St. James Chapel, which is also a joy. Then the acoustic is ready-made for a concert of that size. We just have a limit to the audience we can have. But to do a concert in the Crossing so that we don't have so much reliance on sound design, for example, the New Year's Eve Concert for Peace, we do have sound design. It is amplified so that the whole nave can get that. We would rely less on that if we had a shell behind. My dream is to have a translucent shell so that you could still see through to the high altar, but that's something that would reflect the sound forward would be just amazing. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, it makes the acoustical experience very versatile.
Yeah.
That's great, and that took us in a completely different direction.
Yes.
But
Sorry
very
about that, folks.
interesting. I had never heard of this before. So we're going to open it up to questions now. So I know everybody's been sitting on their hands with questions about, which composer would you love to present, and who out there have we not been able to bring in that you would love to. So let's open it up, and anybody who has a question, please jump in.
This is Richard Duncan. I'm listening in from Minneapolis, and I want to ask Kent, in light of what you've been talking about today, to reflect a little bit on the astounding service this past week, establishing the community of the Crossing. I'm sorry, I don't have the title of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. That was an amazing experience. We planned for that well in advance, although the very reality was that as we got closer, it took on such a life of its own that there also were many changes, additions, subtractions. This is a case where to be where we are in New York and to have our cathedral choir, professional singers who can do most anything, meant we could sing the psalm in French. It meant that we could pivot and do some other things as well. And frankly, our volunteer chorale is incredibly nimble. But this is why the cathedral choir is such a central part of our core. That was a thrilling service to be a part of. I'm not sure how many of you were able to join us, but it should be available on our website also. It was just His Holiness Pope Francis issued a welcome and that was just astounding, talking about the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. And he issued that at the invitation of the Archbishop of Canterbury, who gave his invitation first. And I don't know, does that kind of go to your question?
If you could just say a word about the choir sang.
About what the choir sang.
About what the choir sang. And so, Brian, now this feels like a lifetime ago.
So we go, yeah.
Yes. So,
well, we did.
Oh, Meredith Monk. We started with Meredith Monk. Now this is a case of our broadening what we've done. Musica Sacra commissioned Meredith Monk to write a piece in 1996 called Nightfall. And when we had constructed an evensong, and we now have evensongs every Sunday at 4. Now you all are welcome, welcome, welcome. We were doing Pride celebration in June, evensong, And Meredith Monk, you know, happens to be a gay composer. And we did this incredible piece. Well, I was delighted when it came time for us to do this service for the crossing. It was the staff who said, can we have the Meredith Monk? And so this was the piece that really was just amazing in terms of setting an ethereal, you know, transcendent kind of space spiritually for the room. Then the hymns, our own Dan Ficari orchestrated those for brass, and we used one of Ray Nagam's arrangements for brass. So we had that we had a sense of diversity and a sense of great variety and texture and sound also.
And the final hymn I chose, the Faxted, O God Beyond All Praising, when Pope Francis visited the US in 2015, this was the hymn that kind of finalized his visit. And this was at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I thought it was somewhat fitting to, since His Holiness was with us, to include that. And so we added that at the very end of the service.
Yeah, and then there we were talking about the Spirit right after the death of the Queen, singing this incredible English anthem. It was just so moving.
It was.
Ken, there was a question from Becca. Why is the chorale called the chorale? What is the difference between chorale and choral and chorus?
Oh, I love this. And this people ask me, so what's the difference between choir and chorus? And of course, here we go. So I just hit the wrong button here. Whoops, this one. Let me try again. There we are, back. My screen went whoop, like that. So, you know, these are all titles, you know, that reflect a choral ensemble. And chorale has more, especially in collegiate settings, more of a, it connotes a larger community coming in. And so we wanted to do with the chorale, our cathedral chorale is fantastic. I, you know, heard the rehearsal, you ran it. They're preparing the singing on Sunday. Now we're talking about 25 to 30 adult singers who are marvelous.
From freshmen at Columbia to people who have been in the ensemble for 40 years.
Yes, and from people who are parishioners here to people who actually say, I want to sing there. I don't know about the Episcopal Church very much, but I want to be a part of this community. There are so many ways for people to join our community, whether it's simply by attending a service or by joining, in this case, you know, the chorale. So it is our place, and we've purposely structured the chorale so that it is more, the schedule is more user-friendly than the schedule in a situation where if you're going to sing in the choir, you're expected every Sunday and every Wednesday. We focus this, and the chorale is singing about every other week and rehearsing every Wednesday. So it gives us a chance to really bring things up to a tremendous level. But that's a long-winded answer to your question, Becca. And Becca is a chorale member. Yes, thank you for asking. Okay. Oh, Nancy, you're muted.
This is a note of appreciation for the early Portuguese concert several months ago. It was very imaginative, and I totally loved it. And the program notes are excellent too.
Oh, well, thank you so very, very much. Larry Schenbeck did those program notes. He's a published musicologist who lives in Georgia, and actually was my first conducting teacher. You know, but he's remarkable, and he's written these notes for the Rose of the Compass. Thank you so much. We really worked very hard on that program, and it was a joy to do. Oh, did we have somebody else there?
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Kent and Bryan, we have beautiful music at our 10:30 service. How do you choose it?
Go ahead,
Oh,
Bryan.
sure. Well, of course, it follows what liturgical word will be focused on. So it follows the liturgical year, obviously, and that's for all liturgical, I guess, centered churches, right, we follow this lectionary. So that's how we largely do it. Now, the lectionary, of course, gives us lots of options. Of course, there are many Sundays where it's very obvious what you need to do. But, you know, in this tradition of, you know, the Episcopal tradition, the English cathedral tradition, we have a vast history of music. But even earlier, we have, of course, music that is beyond that tradition that we like to use. So we'll use, you know, Renaissance polyphony that was in the Roman tradition in the 1500s, as we will pair it with a modern psalm setting. So we like to connect the dots here. And I think, again, like we talked about at the beginning, this cathedral has been at the avant-garde from the very beginning, you know, being built right here on the crossroads of Harlem and such. We understand our place in the world. We're a place building bridges and opening doors. And so everything we do, we go through with this understanding of this breadth and width of what the possibilities are. So we still, to answer your question in short, we focus first on the word, and then we look into all the wonderful artistic creations from this area. And New York being the great melting pot it is, it's not too hard to be inspired very easily.
Well, and there's so much, and so and we, you know, of course, then spiritual settings, and then we look to, well, what we then do, there's this combination. I'm so glad you asked the question too, Pat, because so what we try to do is to spread out the diversification, the spectrum of the music over the course of the year, so that we don't have all of a sudden a loading up of, you know, oh gosh, that was a lot of Bach in that month, or why was that all spirituals that month? You know, it's like looking for a consistency overall. And then what we bring to that as we're doing this is we bring then in the grid. There's this grid we work with. Knowing we have the cathedral choir every service, every Sunday gives us the can do, but then we bring in, okay, when is the chorale? What's the best schedule for the chorale? And then we look at the repertoire and it's like, well, let's do this instead of that. We have more singers, you know. And then we also look at this from the chorister point of view, because the choristers come in. Sometimes we have the cathedral choir, the choristers, and the chorale, all of which total now about 80 singers. It's so amazing. The choristers are up to 42 now. And or we'll have the choristers with the cathedral choir, and so then we'll say, aha, let's now change this up in terms of what we're doing. And then we come around also with a larger view. The lectionary runs on a 3-year cycle. Right. And so we may repeat pieces from year to year. That's completely fine. But also on the other hand, we will alternate what we're doing at Easter this year from Easter last year, from, you know, in terms of what's how this is all kind of curated. It's a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time on it this summer because we feel we have the first near normal year in a number.
Yeah. Say about that. I will say
Don't jinx it.
Yeah. With this year, we were very intentional, following Kent's leadership, to be focused on female composers and multiracial composers. Very focused on that.
You know, I want to say, you know, that we are always growing and changing. And for me, and this is not meant as a downer, but I mean this as a lens to see, when my mother passed in January, even though I felt that I always wanted to be empathetic with and sympathetic to people who had lost their mothers, I realized even though I had felt that and attempted that, I had no idea what it was. The lenses fell from my eyes. Now I know what that is like. Well, I must say, even though I've always been interested in a diversity of music, going through our pandemic and through the Black Lives Matter experience, lenses have fallen from my eyes again. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Where are the women composers? And, you know, it's like, I am thrilled. These guys, this publisher in England sent me these volumes, said, would you be interested? This is 2019, just before. And I pulled these out and I'm like, what tremendous resource, you know? What's it called? So these are called Multitude of Voices. These are deeply curated editions of composers living and gone, in wonderful, readily usable editions. We've got them. And so there's going to be even a very different level of steady diversity in our liturgical programming this year. I'm excited about that.
Kent, I have to, just from a personal perspective, say that last year's Ash Wednesday service was one of the most moving absolutely stunningly beautiful services I had ever attended. Like I walked out of there transformed.
Wow.
And one of the things that I think you did, and going back to the space idea and how we use the space, the choir or chorale or whatever form it was, you had actually up a level above the congregants. And I've never seen you do that since then. Maybe you have, and I just missed it. But that created a completely otherworldly experience that was just stunning. And I guess all that to say that you do make, I mean, the way you combine the use of the space with the music, it's just a very different experience. And it sounds like you curate the Sunday worship music or the worship music just as carefully as great music in a great space. So it's like every week you get a free, magnificent concert.
Oh, thank you for that. Well, you know, this goes to, I'm so glad you brought that up, because this goes to the point of rehearsal. Actually doing that kind of thing. And we put the chanters up in the triforium, and we have these spaces that we can use. We would love to experiment more spatially with what we have. Lee Ryder and I've spoken about this a lot. Lee, I don't know if you have anything you want to chime in on, but the idea that it actually, if you really want to do it, you need time. It means you need to be able to pay for the rehearsal time that you need, besides just getting the music ready and standing in one place and singing it. You need time to experiment and be in the space and play with the space. And but that is one of the incredible things that we can do here.
So can you just say more about that? I don't know if everybody understands what you mean by pay for the rehearsal time.
Oh, so what we are talking about is the cathedral choir in this case, for the most part. And the cathedral choir are professional singers. They make their living doing this. And so we have a rehearsal rate. It's about $40 an hour, and a performance rate of about $250, $300 now. And in order to have the time, so let's just say the Gothic Space Concert. We have 4 2.5-hour rehearsals for a concert where we're going to mostly be in one location. If we wanted to have the time to actually explore spatial configurations and rehearse the music as well, we probably should have 6 rehearsals. So, you know, you just do the math and away you go. But at the same time, there are ways that we are constantly, you know, trying to experiment with the space. And in fact, St. Francis Day will be very interesting because we've actually moved the altar further down. The choir is back by the great choir, not in the great choir yet because it's not available to us, but we have more of an antiphonal liturgical dialogue going on between the altar and the musicians. And so these are some of the things we want to do. And I know the dean's very interested in our experimenting with the space. Being able, we need to be able to take risks and say, oh, well, maybe that one didn't work so well, but
I love that. And that sounds like another virtual lunch gathering, just talking about taking risks in our music program. That's and I love that you plugged. So everybody come for St. Francis Day, October 2nd, so that we can all judge whether Kent's risk is going to pay off.
There you are. See how it works. We're excited.
See how it works. Right. Well, are there any final questions before we close up our session today? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us and sharing this hour with us. And thank you, Kent and Bryan. Always an inspiration.
Thank you.
It's such a joy to be with you all. And we look forward to seeing you very soon, very soon.
Bye.
All right. God bless.